Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar of the outcome harvesting community. So my name is Jules Geers and I'm an independent consultant based in Belgium. And I have been working with outcome harvesting since the very beginning. I'm also one of the outcome harvesting community facilitators, together with Carmen Wilson-Grau and Connie Hoytink, who will now also introduce themselves. Carmen?
Hi everyone, my name is Carmen Wilson-Grau. I'm an independent consultant based in Guatemala and one of the outcome harvesting community facilitators.
Thank you. Connie?
Good afternoon from my side of the world, everybody. My name is Connie Hoytink. I'm also an outcome harvesting consultant and I'm based in the Netherlands, and together with Jule and Carmen facilitating this community.
Great. So normally we run these webinars once a month, but we noticed that there's a big interest among our members in learning about virtual tools for outcome harvesting. So we decided to organize additional webinars on this topic. If you have used virtual tools for outcome harvesting, or you have experience in running outcome harvesting workshops virtually, and you're interested in presenting a case, please let us know by email. And you can present on other webinars. We would kindly like to ask you to keep yourselves muted and your cameras off during the presentations. And after the presentation, we will have time for Q&A. You're welcome to post your questions in the chat box during the presentations. And so during the Q&A session, you can either ask a question in the chat box or raise your hand to talk. For this webinar, we're also going to show you some of the functionalities of Zoom, which you can also use during your outcome harvesting virtual workshops. So having said that, it would be great if we get an idea of who's out there with us. So I'm going to show you the whiteboard of Zoom. So welcome everyone. We would like to know who's with us today. We've already put our names up here, and we would like to invite you to also share your names with us on this whiteboard. You can do so. If you look on top, you will see view options in the top bar. If you press that, you will see another button say annotate. Once you press annotate, you should be able to draw on my whiteboard. If you then press the text, so the big T that says text, you're able to put in text and put your name on the screen. But you're also welcome to draw your name on here. Great. This is nice. Hi, everyone. So great to see you all. Wonderful. Okay, that's great. So keep on going. I'm going to introduce, meanwhile, our speakers. So do continue putting your names there. It's great to see who's out there. So our first speaker for today is Stef Depree. He's an independent consultant based in Belgium and owner of Voices That Count. And Stef will be explaining the workshop tool Mural to you. Our second speaker will then be Sarah Haddad, who's working for Dignity, the Danish Institute Against Torture in Jordan. And she will explain a similar tool, but yet also different, which is Plectica. And she will explain how she's used it to do sense making in outcome harvesting. And finally, we have Barbara Kloekma with us from South Africa, who will talk about her insights generated by participants in a couple of online evaluations. At the end, we will also show you the breakout room function. So we will just ask you to go into a breakout room and introduce yourselves to the others before we go into the Q&A session. Okay, I see all these wonderful names up here. So hi again to everyone. It's great to see. I'm now going to hand over to the first speaker, Stef. Stef, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stef, And as Goele said, I've been outcome mapping, outcome harvesting practitioner consultant for the last 10, 15 years. And as many of us, we are now looking for tools to do our work online. And I must say that the last 2-3 weeks have been an exploration or an investigation in different tools. And one of them is Mural, that I knew from before, but I have now explored much further because of the necessity to work online for sense-making workshops, design workshops, for outcome harvesting workshops, and so on, and doing it actually fully online. What I will explain in this webinar is the use of Mural. There are many of those kind of tools. It's basically digital space, a kind of whiteboard that can be used collaboratively with a lot of people that you sign up to it. And I usually work with Zoom in combination with Mural. And it has a lot of functionalities in terms of the widgets you can add, all the different aspect texts. Just as an example, for instance, I took this from the website, a screenshot. You can just edit, you can put different kind of post-its, you can change it very easily if you want, and edit. And I think this is very handy for collaborative working together, for instance, for a harvesting process, or if you have the outcomes already, to facilitate analysis and sense making of your outcomes with a team, a small team or a bigger team. So what I want to maybe first say about some key features that are useful for facilitating outcome harvesting processes with Mural is that in Mural you have different rooms, so you can dedicate a particular room to a particular project or client or organization you are working with. And then within the room, you can have specific boards. So now I'm in the board intro Mural. You can, for instance, design your boards according to the different steps of the outcome harvesting process and work collaboratively in this room. It stays there. People can access it also when you are offline at home individually. And I must say I do that a lot. I do half-day workshops, and then people have like a few days to do homework, and then they can add further information to the boards. Of course, the most important one is the fact that you can invite people to collaborate. So I can easily, for instance, if I would have all your email addresses, I would then add it here, and I can invite you to collaboratively join here and work together. You see the post-its here, which I think are a fantastic tool, very visual. You can put colors and all kinds of things. You can change the sizes very easily. You can copy paste very easily and drag them wherever you want. You can group them like this and move them. So it's very handy. It's really like post-its on a whiteboard, but I would even say it's even handier than the ones you use in a face-to-face workshop. And then you can import items. You can import images, screenshots, Word document, PDF documents, which is handy if you want to have some basic documents there that people can also consult while they are busy. So what I want to do now is to show one example, let's say, for a harvest. Like one of the things what I normally do, I normally work with teams and organizations and use outcome harvesting for internal monitoring and evaluation, not so much for external evaluations, is to collaboratively think, for instance, about all the actors that potentially the organization of the project, the change agent has influenced. And you make a board or a specific dedicated place where the different type of actors can be added. And as we develop outcomes for those, we give colors to the type of different actors. that's like one thing you can do, and then of course you can edit. This is an example of a value chain program, but of course every project has its own way of doing that. A second thing, what I have started to do now is to make one dedicated place where the final outcomes from the collaborative effort in the harvest, or if you do it individually or even in small groups, once you have the outcomes ready, these are some demo examples from a previous program. We write the outcome, significance, and the contribution statements here. And you know, once they appear here in this central board, we know they are semi-final. They still need to be verified and substantiated, but they are final actually for entry in a database. I understood that last seminar webinar you were talking about Podio. So we use a link here. Whenever this is ready, people can automatically go to input the outcomes in Podio and then add all the taggings they would like to add to the outcome. So this is the final board where everything comes together. Sorry. Yeah, and what I've done is I developed this very simple templates, as if I would divide a whiteboard or a digital or a flip chart paper, for instance. And then I would say I would divide through the breakout groups here in Zoom people into different groups, and you work in two or alone or with 3 or 4 people, and you start to harvest after they have been introduced, of course. And then they start to formulate outcomes. So it's very easy to type in these post-its, so you can easily type on it. The colors indicate significance, contribution. And this is, for instance, you give them some time to work in their groups to harvest and to formulate the outcomes. And then there is, I will also show you like how it looks when you zoom out. You can look at your entire board like this. There are 4 groups working simultaneously at this whiteboard. And once, for instance, group 2 is finished and they want to present, we all go to that space and they present the outcomes. We can provide feedback. We can fine tune the outcomes, the significance and the contribution. And if we are happy, we move the outcomes further back into the central board. And then from here, they are going into in the upload. Then something quick about analysis. Once you have your outcomes, let me show you something. So this is an Excel sheet. Our outcomes were put in Podio and then exported in Excel. It's a very good functionality and easy to just copy paste your outcomes here, and you can zoom out so I can see where they are. So they are here. I will position them right here, and I can say make post-its out of it. And then I have my outcomes here. You see them, all the outcomes. We don't need to type them. We have them from Word or Excel, and we have them all on little post-its. And now they are ready for analysis. The colors I was talking about, the actors, for instance, now we can color all the outcomes according to their which actor they are. And you can then group them, you can categorize them. You can do this collaboratively, type of actors, type of change, and so on. So instead of doing it alone on your desk or in a workshop with cards or printed out outcomes, you can do it collaboratively here online. For instance, also one of the exercises, if you look at all the unexpected outcomes that were achieved, you immediately see from which actors they are. Maybe a few people can look at those and then formulate the conclusions of what do we learn and what do we see in the unexpected outcomes that we need to take forward. What we also do, for instance, is this collaborative contribution rating. It's on this scale, for instance, where we post all the outcomes and we discuss, we take this one, we discuss together how did we contribute. The contribution can be written here next to oh, sorry. Here, for instance, here you discuss together how did we contribute to this outcome, and then we give it a scaling whether it was contributed or it was achieved only because of us as a project, or on the other side, it's not really because of us, but a collaboration with others or through other factors. And so you get a collective rating of all your outcomes together. And then you can investigate, for instance, all the ones that you think were as a result of our project and to a very high extent, and try to find out.
Yeah, Steph, we can't hear you anymore. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah to do the next presentation. So thank you very much, Steph. If any more questions are there, it can still be addressed during the Q&A session. Sarah, go ahead and tell us about Plectica.
Thank you, Steph. It was very useful, and I think I'll actually look more into Muriel now after your presentation. So now I'll give a brief presentation on Plectica and how Dignity's experience has been so far in using the tool. It's still within the second week of using it, so we don't have such a huge experience, but I'll share it on the project that we were able to use Plectica on. So just to give you a brief on the project and why we chose to do online visualization and why it was necessary. So it was a 5-year project that has been funded by DAP and the EU, and it was for the purpose of evaluation. So we hadn't harvested the outcomes while they were coming up during the implementation of the project, but rather after the project was complete, we had multiple sessions of outcome harvesting. Plectica is something that we used after we gathered all the outcomes and finalized them and entered them into Podio. So it wasn't a Podio is an online tool that can be used as a database, and the previous webinar was on Podio, so you can go out and check that if you haven't yet. It was used after, Plectica was used after we gathered everything on Podio. So we had all the outcomes finalized. Since the project had a large number of outcomes, 45, it was necessary that we use a tool to visualize them, even if we didn't have the problem of Corona, even if we were all in the same country or even in the same room. I think using an online space allows you to edit things more easily, to shift, to make sure that you're having multiple versions that you can discuss in real time and like see multiple ways of visualizing and sense making. And especially within this project, because there were many levels of achievements on state level, on social actors that are on multiple levels, so it's good to have them mapped out. And there are many causality links throughout the 5-year project, so there are outcomes that led to other outcomes. Yeah, and it's very easy for teams to collaborate. I saw that one of the questions last time was what's the cost of tools? So Plectica is free for basic users, and then there are different price ranges. You can, I'll leave it on the board here on the presentation for you to see. We're currently, because it's still our first project, we're on the basic option, but then if we have more cards, which are like the post-its, the one similar to the post-its in Muriel, if we need to use more of those, then we'll probably have to upgrade. So yeah, it's easy to share, similar to Muriel, easy to share, easy to have more than one person edit at the same time. It's very intuitive, and we really didn't need a template, so we wanted to work with a blank canvas, a blank slate that shows that we can insert outcomes and group them and make sure that we're making the causality relations in the sense-making process. Yeah, so I have a few steps that I want to go through when we're doing on Plectica. So I'll keep this here just so when you want to review the webinar, if you want to see it in the future, you know what the steps are and you can refer to them, but I'll go through that now when I share the Plectica project that we have. All right. So, as I said, we started with a blank canvas, and there are pretty much three things you need to know. There's the basic card and the relationships. Those were the two most important things that we had to use while creating the sense-making exercise. The first step was making sure that we have the correct title, because we're going to have multiple versions and multiple maps. So make sure that you're titling your maps correctly. The second step is entering all the outcomes into those text boxes, which are similar to the post-it cards. So this is pretty much the text of the outcome. The title is also important, because when you zoom out, this is the only thing you're going to be able to see. So for you to have like a brief introduction about what the outcome talks about, a titling is also important, and a reference number. We made sure that we cross-reference the outcome with its number on Podio. So if we want to go there and check out contribution, significance, and all those things that we need to use, we know where to refer to. So the second step was making sure that you have all the outcomes in boxes. There isn't an import function, or for the basic user, so far as I've seen, there isn't an import function. So you have to copy paste all the outcomes. But then that shouldn't take more than an hour. So copy paste all the outcomes and have them as sticky notes. Then make sure you group them into whatever seems more intuitive. For us, there were two aspects, things that were on chronological order and things that were within a similar social actor or similar theme. After that, we were able to set the links. So you can see how for instance, initial political willingness outcome led to a political incentive, and how different outcomes were linked. The third important thing, other than the basic card and the correlation, is the region. So we used regions to give overall themes, or this is in essence the sense-making exercise, dividing them into regions, which we were later able to write about in separate case stories. We did not use Plectica as the only tool. So in parallel, we were using it with Podio, in addition to the comment section that we have here. So we can communicate and leave comments, and the people who are shared on this working space would be present on top. You would see who is active, and when you hover over their name, you can see who contributed what. So changes are also shown, and you can see who changed what. What else is important? Yes. We have questions in the chat. I'm sorry. Yeah. So yeah, we use it in parallel with Teams. So while discussing or while editing online, we would be on a group meeting, and we would discuss, for instance, why we created those links. Do we think they're different? Yeah, we'll see if there are different links that we need to add. Are there ways that we can rotate the maps, which was also done through different platforms. So I wouldn't advise that we do all the communication in this platform, because way too many comments would be difficult to manage, and then having face-to-face meetings, even though they're virtual, is far better than having everything written down. Yeah, that's it. Because it's a large project and there were many ways to view how we can group outcomes. Another strategy that we used is making multiple copies. So what you can do is you can duplicate, one second, you can duplicate, you can duplicate the map. So this is why I said that it's important that you have the correct titles, because you might have different maps, each one doing sense making in different manners. Yeah, I'm done. I am sure that I'm going to answer more questions during the Q&A. And yeah, we can go ahead and go to Barbara now.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. That's really interesting. Barbara, I'm going to hand over to you. So in your case, it will not be about a specific tool, but just how your lessons learned from the workshops, the virtual workshops you've done. Go ahead, Barbara.
Hi, everyone. So as Hula said, I'm just going to share some lessons that I've drawn literally over the last few weeks about running workshops online. I now realize how audacious this is, because since I've done them and since I wrote a little blog about the experience after another evaluator said, oh, please write about that, I've realized the obvious, which is that there's masses of experience out there in how you do this. And at the end of my 6 lessons, I'll share with you some of the manuals I've found, some of the blogs I've found that I think are really interesting. I think one forgets that there are a world of people who run their businesses online, do their training online, and so on. So that's my little caveat. But here are my lessons, except that my computer is not agreeing to move forward. So it might be, if I click my arrow, nothing happens. Hang on a minute. Aha, arrow on the screen, right. This is about learning to use Zoom and PowerPoints on Zoom. So you all know the challenges. Familiarity with the platform. I've realized that you have to start off by taking people through whatever platform you're using so that they're comfortable with using it. The challenge of bandwidth, people's voices going in and out, some people not being able to use video, sound stopping and starting. The problem of reading body language, for me, that's the biggest difference as a facilitator between running a workshop this way and doing it in a room, is that so much of good facilitation is about reading the energy in the room. And that's much, much harder to do. That it's tiring to sit facing the computer for hours. Working across time zones is very complex compared to when everybody comes together. Sitting at a desk without being able to move about, and so on and so on. So I've run 2 workshops since, oh, I must get rid of my pictures because I can't see. There we go. So I've run 2 workshops. One was with the WeGo's Urban Policy Program, Developing a Theory of Change. And this was with people from Brazil and Canada and Italy and South Africa, amongst others. So we were all supposed to be together in London, and instead we were online. And then use of outcome harvesting in the monitoring, evaluation, learning system of the African Women's Development Fund, where I had done a face-to-face training, a very formal training actually, with the fund, which I've been coaching for about a year to use it. But they had new staff members. And so I did it with 2 people. In both cases, I asked them if we could evaluate the content and the process, and the lessons I'm sharing with you are from those evaluations. So it's a rather small sample for the insights. The first one is to have very clear objectives for the whole thing and per session, and very clear time allocations. And you can see in this picture, I actually wrote what the time would be for every single time zone, because I think it drops the anxiety if people can see where they are in their own time space. This doesn't mean you can't change it if you need to. We all know when you facilitate, sometimes you have to make changes. But nevertheless, I think being very clear on what you're trying to do in what period of time, and then facilitating in such a way that you keep to the time. And now I'm just about to contradict that, but I think it's a good general principle. Lesson 2, in times of stress, make time for personal debriefs, even when people know each other well. So for most people in the room, except for the people from Italy, we had only gone into lockdown the day before or 2 days before, and everybody was in shock. And this is a group of people, I'm thinking now, the WeGo Urban Policies program, they've worked together for years. They all know each other very well. So I had only planned 5 minutes welcome and purpose. In fact, I'd met them face to face to discuss what we'd be doing, how we'd be doing it. So I led, as you see there, I had 15 minutes in total for the welcome, purpose, orientation to the agenda. Everybody was on board. But I realized immediately that we had to spend some time talking about how people were, what was happening, what all of this was going to mean. And I landed up in the end using about 30 minutes for that exercise. So I think that was a very good lesson for me, and in innumerable workshops I've been in since then, I've realized that. And I suppose that's part of feminist praxis, the personal's political, all those things. How much more you would have to do this for people who don't know each other. I've run workshops not on outcome harvesting in the last couple of weeks, and have given a lot of time for introductions. And the documents I've been looking at on working online give lots of examples of icebreakers and that kind of thing. My lesson 3 is that things need to be in writing. Somehow when you're there and you can reiterate things and you can see quickly if people don't get it, it's not as important. But I actually put into the agenda, as you can see here, for example, this was an activity everybody was going to have to do first of all by themselves, and then we pulled it all together, and I had the steps they had to take written in the agenda, and I think that was very, very helpful. Lesson 4, lots of time. Steph also mentioned this. Much less time in plenary, giving people lots of time to do work offline, not just to do particular exercises, but also to think. Time to work alone, time for people to work in couples. For that, you could use the breakout rooms, or in fact, some people were working after the workshop, some were going to work the next morning because of the time zone differences. So some people used Zoom, some used Skype, but we did a lot of work in couples. And then also I made long breaks between sessions. When was people's lunchtime and tea time was different in different places, but also just so people could move around and clear their heads. So I did the agenda in a very, very different way from the way I would if we were in a meeting together. And then, as I've said, not to use the whole day. We did the Theory of Change workshop in 2 days. It was incredibly intense, even with all the things I'm saying here. And if I were to do it again, I would have thought maybe max 2 hours, 2.5 hours a day, remembering that people are also sitting in other Zoom meetings and other such, and it all gets rather exhausting. My lesson 5 is written reporting. So I wasn't using a mural or a plectica. So instead, people reported the work that they had done, sending it in fact to me by email. Many of them looked at each other's, and sometimes we asked them to look at each other's before we came back into plenary, so that everybody could read and think about it before discussing in plenary. And then I merged people's work into a single document to work within the plenary. Now, if you had one of these platforms, of course, you wouldn't have to do that in the same way. So I thought I'd just give you an example. In the Outcome Harvest training, one of the sessions was on how to draft an outcome statement, with the participants doing a few and us talking about what makes a strong outcome description, contribution description. And then offline, people drafted their outcomes. They sent them to me. I sent comments back using track changes and comment boxes in Word. And I sent those to everybody so people could see each other's. They reviewed the comments, and only then did we meet in plenary the next day and discuss them together and drew out lessons we've learned. So for me, a big lesson was about not trying to do it all in the group, sitting there together. And my last lesson, I called artful facilitation. It was an issue named by all of the participants. It's not very easy, as you know, to say, what is it that makes for good facilitation? But some of the things that they noted were authenticity, very careful listening, recognizing different comfort levels of different people in the group by dint of language, personality, hierarchy in the room, trying to bring in as much humor as possible, being adaptable, including shifting the agenda, and at the same time ensuring movement towards objectives and not getting lost in the process. So as I said, achieving these things on time. And so I'm going to end there on the subject of humor. The image I've got here was done not in an online workshop, in a face-to-face workshop with a group that were doing their a kind of case statement of what they were about. And they drew me in the very top corner of their flip chart. And this was the picture they drew of me, which amused me enormously because it looks so much like I'm asking about an outcome description, doesn't it? So I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to first go to the breakout rooms. So this is not to have a real discussion in the breakout rooms, but the only thing that we're going to do is to introduce yourself. So basically, Carmen is going to put you into a breakout room. You will be there with just a few people, and if you could just say your name and which organization you're you're working for, that would be great. So Carmen, if you could assign people to a waiting room. This will just be for like 2 minutes, and then you will be called back to us. Okay, great. We have most people back here. Thank you very much. So this was just for you to experience what it's like to use the breakout rooms in Zoom, so that you can also use that if you run an online workshop. So you can let people work on an exercise and then call them back into the main room. Okay, welcome back everyone. So we're now going to move into the Q&A session. I hope you enjoyed your time in the breakout rooms. I think it's also nice because these webinars can be a bit impersonal, that you get to know who else is here in this webinar. Great. Okay. As for the question, can I ask everyone to switch off their cameras again and stay muted so that we only have the people visual here who are actually presenting? So I'm going to start with the questions here that I received in the chat box, but feel free, if you have a question, to raise your hand. We can unmute you and you can also ask your question live. Okay. First questions are about Mural. So Steph, somebody's saying, thanks, I do have a question. Do people use Mural during a facilitated session, or do people continue to for example, paste post-its on the Mural after a session at their own time?
Yes, both. So I think it's good to start together and facilitate it, and also make people aware how it works, because it has some functionalities, and the dragging around and the movement has to be, I mean, you have to get familiar with it, so you learn together. But then it's very good to well, I must say, compared to like a 2-3 day harvesting workshop, I would personally not do that online for such a period. I would break it down in half days, 3 times half days, with some days in between. And you can give people homework. And the good thing is that they can continue working on the same mural, on the same boards, and add things. And then once you come back together, you work further on things. So it's actually both synchrone and asynchronous, actually. And I think that's adding to what Barbara said as like good tips for online facilitation. I think it's a good mix between those two is actually very healthy as well, because I don't know how you feel about it, but after one day of Zooming, your head is quite exploding almost.
Yes, great. Thanks, Steph. Edda has a question here. Edda, I'm going to unmute you.
Yes,
Go ahead.
thank you. My question is to Steph. From what I heard, it's more, Mural is more for projects and programs. So I was wondering, is it possible to use it for external evaluation? Then to Barbara, I wanted to know, yes, there was evaluation of process and content. That way, basically, the participants were evaluating you. On your part, how are you able to evaluate the participants on what they gained, how much they gained from your presentation? Thank you.
Okay, Barbara, you want to start?
That's hilarious. I mean, I suppose if you were asking how did I evaluate them, it was that they were all continuously engaged. Nobody kind of vanished, or you didn't have just some people speak and not others. So, you know, there was a fairly equal participation, and we got through the task. We finished what we had to do. There was one pregnant woman in the group, and that was where having video helped a lot, because I could see when she was standing up and stretching, and that was a good marker for me that the sitting with the huge baby in her tummy was quite uncomfortable. Yeah, I think mostly by their participation and by the fact that we completed the task, and that they were kind of quite warm and you know, they were very open and eliciting ideas from each other, which I also thought was really great. I'd have to think about your question more, but that's what I can think of for now.
Thanks, Barbara. Steph, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so the question was, can it also be used for external evaluation? I think so. The moment you need to, somewhere in the process, work collaboratively with your team evaluating, or with respondents, or the organization or project you are evaluating, I think it's a very good tool. And if it's about brainstorming, it's about co-creating, doing things together. I think you can even facilitate focus group discussions, interviews, and then the harvesting process and the analysis. So I would say yes. I don't see a big difference with other processes. So I think it's definitely possible.
Great. Can you also talk a bit about how many people you work with in the same session in Mural and Plectica? Maybe Steph, you can start first, and then I hand over to Sarah.
If you have the normal standard application of Mural, you can go up to 50 people, which is a lot, I would say. But I normally, the biggest I've done is 2025 2 weeks ago. But there you really need to work a lot in breakout groups and so on. But I think teams between 6 and 12 are actually, that's very manageable and very easy to work with, I think.
Great. Sarah, in your case, how many people did you have?
Yeah, we were up to 5 people, but I don't see a limitation in terms of technology why it shouldn't be more people, but in terms of trying to edit and trying to give more input on the mapping exercise, it would get way too complex if everyone is doing way too many additions. So this can reflect, Plectica can reflect the final result rather than the discussions. That's why I advise it as a tool to be used in conjunction with team meetings or Google Team meetings.
Yes, great. Nick van der Jacht, you had a question as well. Can you tell us?
on the exporting maybe, because I can see there is a question whether we can export the mapping exercise from Plectica.
Exactly. Now, my question was mainly to you, but I guess also to Steph from Mural.
Yeah.
So does it work in terms of, do you export as an image or editable picture?
Yeah, it
so
can be.
go ahead.
Sarah, if you
Oh,
start.
okay. So it's either a PDF or image or PowerPoint presentation. Those are like the three options on Plectica.
Yeah.
Great. Seb?
The same here, the whole board can be exported in a PDF. You can do items, you can select the outcomes, for instance, and then choose whether it's PDF, a picture, or to words, to a text in Word, and then you can. It's not that it's not going back to Excel. I haven't found that one.
Thanks. Great.
Okay, thank you. There's also a question if you can, or how you use Zoom in combination with Mural or Plectica. Steph, if you can start.
Yeah, well, for me, the feature I use most is breakout groups. If you have multiple bigger groups, and if people have to work on their own, and even within Mural, you can assign boards to different groups. Or you, like the board I was showing you, the boards are so big and you can extend them so they're actually very big. You can zoom in and zoom out, and people can work in their own space and another group can work on another space, but basically you are just working in the same board, which is really, really helpful. Yeah, and I mean, Zoom is the facilitation technology to be together. Sometimes we switch off videos, we don't switch off videos, we breakout groups. The polls are a nice feature. I haven't used it too much. Yeah, I think that's basically it. Yeah. So it's more a communication tool, I would say.
Great. Sarah, anything to add there?
Same. The only thing I can add is that I wouldn't suggest that everyone works at the same map at the same time, because if you make way too many changes at the same time, you wouldn't know which version to go back to. So again, duplicating maps would be a better option, and using Zoom for communication in real time to discuss what changes you actually want to make.
Yes, and the question related is if you can use Mural or Plectica in the breakout rooms of Zoom.
Yes, because they are separated. So there are two applications that are open at the same time. So even though if you are in a breakout group to communicate and to talk and to sit in your own group, so to speak, at the same time you are working on the central Mural space. And I guess it's the same for the other software.
Yeah, great. Okay. Another question maybe for Barbara is if do these online workshops require more time, and also in terms of costs for facilitation, will it be approximately the same?
Gosh, I don't know that they involve more time in total. It's just that I would organize them over a longer period of time, if you know what I mean, for the reasons I mentioned and that Steph has mentioned, that trying to do this very intensively in one day or in 2 days, it's too much. It's overwhelming. And so, but I don't think that the total time would necessarily be more time. It's just that you might do it over a longer period of time, I think I'll, give us a few more months and I'll have more insights about this.
Great. Okay, our time is almost up. I just want to take a last minute. So we're gonna try and start the poll again. So this is a thing with online tools. Sometimes they don't work the way you want them to work. So we're gonna try it one last time. Carmen, if you can launch the poll.
While the poll is going, I think I want to answer a couple more questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the bandwidth, you need internet in order to work on it real time. It's not as Podio when you can have a link and with minimal internet you can enter an outcome. This needs internet throughout the entire process. If you have bad connection, maybe you might not be able to see all the changes that are being made. But if you need to access the map at a later stage when it's already done and without you needing to edit at the same time, then that's okay. Another question on the link between Podio and Plectica, there is no link. So whenever you edit something on Podio, you'll have to do the changes on Plectica manually and vice versa. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, we received some votes for the poll. I hope everyone was able to find it. I see some people have voted, so do continue. I'm going to take one last question meanwhile, so that we get some idea of which webinars you would like us to host in the future. So do select which language you would like the webinar to be in. So last question, and then we're going to close the webinar. So somebody's asking, do you think it's better to introduce workshop attendees to a new technology or use something that they are more comfortable with, like yeah, email or any other tool they're familiar with? Who would like to give it a go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an issue. I'm working with a group almost weekly, and they are all very familiar with it now, and it's very easy, and we discover new features along the way. But in another group with, I would say, maybe more limited digital experience in this kind of things, you spend some time on explaining things, and you need to build it in. And I think in terms of overall facilitation, it's not only content and process this time, but it's also the technical thing also need to be facilitated and need to be taken care of. So it's especially the first times, it's an important aspect, and you have to take time for it.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so before we go, I just want to grab your attention because we have different webinars going on. There will be the usual monthly webinars as well. So first of all, I'm going to thank, I see many people answering here to the poll. That's great for us to know. And we see there's a big interest in different languages, so that's great. So thank you very much to our speakers of today. So Steph Dupre, Barbara Krugman, and Sarah Haddad. So I see there are some more questions which we haven't been able to answer, but please feel free to contact the presenters or to send your question via the community. We have another webinar coming up in April, and we will have Nick van der Jacht from NIMD and Joni Hapanen from Demo Finland talking about substantiating outcomes in a low trust environment. So please join us again on the 21st of April. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day, evening, wherever you are in the world, and take care. Bye, everyone.